Hi, everyone. My name's Jacob Wilkins, and I am part of the Belisario College of Communications Alumni Society Board. And we are really excited to host the next chapter in our Creating Content virtual series. Before I introduce our esteemed guests, who some of you have been eavesdropping into our conversation, I want to thank Mike Porman, who has really put an incredible amount of effort into putting this together. The rest of our board, led by Pam Harvey and so thank you to Pam, and really excited to get things going. So it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Lucas, who is the executive producer for Animal Planet and Discovery, and Kathleen Pavelko, the president and CEO emerita for WITF Public Media in Harrisburg, as we are going to discuss a wide array of topics. I should also say the Q&A is open, as some of you have been telling us what you're interested in and commenting. You can ask questions from the start, and we will try to interweave your questions throughout the discussion. And maybe we'll even dedicate the Q&A part at the end. But certainly we want this to be as interactive as possible, as if we were at Carnegie sitting right there with you. So we don't want to be talking into a vacuum. I know the three of us have all agreed on that. So let's get things going. And we'll start with Kathleen. We talked, Kathleen, about how the industry is evolving. And a great way to start, we thought, was to tell us about your first job and how it compares to what your current position looks like.
Oh, well, there's a big compare and contrast going on there. My first job was actually at Penn State Public Broadcasting, then called WPSX, and the title was editorial assistant. Another one of those not really quite appropriate names. I was the writer for a weekly statewide news broadcast, basically a government wrap-up called, appropriately enough, Pennsylvania. And it was one of the first collaborative enterprises among the then 8 public television stations. They all agreed that they were going to fund it. They all agreed they were going to air it. And so I was the writer behind the scenes. I will say that that's the one thing that has some comparability today, and that is that the now 7 public television stations in Pennsylvania cooperate broadly on educational content delivery, on programs that they air together. There are weekly collaborations among staff. So that piece is still in place. I think some of the biggest had to do with the production methods. Nobody went out by him or herself as a single entity, capturing audio and video and being the reporter. I went everywhere with an audio person and a videographer and me as the interviewer. So that's one of the biggest changes on the production side between then and now.
Right, the one-man band, which used to be something that a few people could offer that was unique. It seems that the expectation now is for a lot of people to be able to do their own shooting and writing and editing and all that. So my first job when I graduated was it was a production coordinator position in a production company that specialized in medical news, and it was based in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And at the time, it was kind of like, well, it's my first job in television, I'm going to take whatever I can get. And it turned out to be probably the best thing I could have done. It was a small production company, and I say this to any students that I speak with. Starting small gives you the opportunity to grow. And when people were sick or people broke a leg or whatever, couldn't go out on a shoot, if you're the body standing there, you're the one who gets to go out and do it. And so I started as production coordinator, went to associate producer, and was supervising producer by the time I left in 7 years. And man, some of the basics that I learned, I still, we're talking about what are the differences. There are a lot of similarities, like some of the really, the work ethic, good storytelling, great shooting, great music, great use of sound. It all still applies today. So I would say there, for as many differences as there are just as many similarities.
Your point, Lisa, about the open door once you get in there and be open to those opportunities. That show, Pennsylvania, that I was hired to be the writer for, it ceased production after the first year. But the then general manager went to me and he said, "How would you like to host a daily live interview show?" And I was absolutely too green to be scared out of my mind. And so I said yes. And so for the next 3 years, basically, I was hosting a live show. Some of you may remember Weather World. So it was, I introduced the meteorologist, 6 minutes of weather, and then 20 minutes of packages and interviews with me as the host and interviewer. So always be willing to say yes, even if you're either scared out of your mind or too inexperienced to be scared out of your mind.
Yeah, actually, I would say I would second that. Any opportunity that comes your way. In fact, I just had this happen to me 2 days ago. It was like something that landed in my lap. Do you want to do it? Don't say no. Say yeah, and then you can panic about it later. Panic when you're done, when you hang up or get off your Zoom call. But honestly, if you're a smart person, and you obviously you are, because you wouldn't have gotten it offered to you in the first place, just say yes and figure it out later. Plenty of people in this business, plenty of colleagues you can tap for information. Do your research. Yeah, don't say no.
Lisa, I just learned something about you that I didn't, and I'm sure there's a lot more, and that is we both grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Really?
How about that?
How about that? Great.
Where'd you go to high school?
Pizza in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Where'd you go to high school?
Southern Lehigh, so the southern.
A little bit, yeah. I went to William Allen. So here's my question for you, and that is, when you were in high school and planning to go to college, what did you intend to do? And compare and contrast that with what you ended up doing.
That's a great question. And how many people I run into who majored in broadcasting did not end up in broadcasting? Mm-hmm. I'm one of the few who did. When I was in high school, I was lucky enough, and I don't know how many of you other folks on the call had this opportunity, but in high school we had a TV station. We had a TV station, and we had a little radio broadcast. I mean, it was pretty lame, It was like we read the news in the morning. It was not great, but I caught the bug. So I caught the bug. It started in middle school, actually. Even our middle school had, I think, with the local PBS had donated all their used equipment to us. So we had something to work with. I caught the bug then. And when I went into college, I knew I wanted to go into television, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I didn't know it was everything from set design to, I don't know, I want to be a reporter. And it wasn't until I had my first job that I think it started to solidify for me. So I think it's okay. You don't know sometimes when you're 30 what you want to do for the rest of your life. You're not going to know when you're 18 what you want to do for the rest of your life. And I think a lot of young people put that stress on themselves. For folks who joined after, I've got 2 kids. My daughter is a graduate of Penn State College of Communications. She's doing events now, very successfully though, and taps everything that she learned in the broadcasting and writing side at Penn State. She's applying that to the work that she's doing right now. So I would say the good news about the College of Communications is it's so broad that you get just such a wide range of experiences and learnings that you can apply to so many different positions.
I do think that makes a lot of sense, that you have to give yourself flexibility to adjust your career path over time.
Right.
Now, my path was actually the opposite of yours. When I was in high school and actually well into college, I was absolutely certain what I was going to do. I was going to get a history degree at Penn State. I was going to go to law school, and I was going to teach constitutional law. Now, so go ahead and compare and contrast what I actually ended up doing with the absolute certainty that that's what I was going to do. And so whether it's within the realm of journalism and production and telecommunications, or whether it's more broadly, because of course Penn State offers many educational opportunities, is give yourself permission to change your mind.
Right. Right. Even midstream, you can change your mind. Try something else. I mean, again, the field is so broad, and it's getting even broader.
Mhm.
At one point, I thought I wanted to report, and I volunteered. I live in DC. That's DC out there. I volunteered at a local. It was, you know, a Maryland independent station, just for a summer. It's like, I want to try reporting, and it was great. And I did well enough, but I got it out of my system. It was like, yep, nope, don't want to do that. So if you know, if you hear things are going on and there's an opportunity to volunteer, I know ultimately everybody's got to be able to make some money, but
Mhm.
I think it's a great way to dip your toe in the water, see if it's something you're interested in. And on the other hand, you may get into it and see, you know what, I really like the producing side, or I like the writing side, or I really dig what the lighting director does. Give yourself opportunity for those kinds of experiences without money necessarily. And that could help you focus in on what it is you're interested in doing. We're not really talking about what the subject matter is.
Well, I just wanted, that's a good way for me to jump in. And if you guys, the rest of the panel will just be about Allentown, actually. We'll
There we
shifted
go.
course in a dramatic way. Tell me, everything's sort of creating content is a pretty broad subject matter, but I want to ask in the career path department, if each of you could tell me about a turning point in your career, whether it was a promotion or your first big break or something, or a mentor that gave you some really good advice to put you on the path to very successful places where both of us sit right now.
Go ahead, Kath.
Well, I think I would point to the very eventful year that I had in London in the gap between my undergraduate degree. I was still in the process of completing my master's degree, but I hadn't yet had a real full-time job. My husband was on sabbatical, and I decided to be bold. And I wrote to the Sunday Times of London and said, are you open to interviewing me about freelance jobs? And to my surprise, they said yes. So I went in and interviewed, and they said, okay, we'll give you a shot. And the first opportunity, the first freelance gig was, there was a smallpox outbreak that escaped from a research facility in the Midlands in England. And I was tasked with collecting information about what that was, not to go there, but to collect information. And hey, I'm this brash American. I don't know what the norms of reporting are. So I call up the director of the facility. He was so shocked to receive a direct cold call from a reporter that he gave me the information that I needed. And that was one of the signs to me that as long as your instincts are honorable and within the bounds of the profession, that you should take action on them. And that meant a great deal to the rest of the year in London and the further reporting I did for the Sunday Times. But it also was an indication of, be bold when you're looking for a new job, or be bold when you're asking for an additional opportunity within the organization that you're in.
Yeah, I would say probably for me there are two turning points early in my career, and this is at the production company. You know, I would do anything for the producers I was working for. I don't know. It just I guess I knew the way to learn was to do absolutely everything that they were doing, to be, you know, make myself indispensable. Um, and so one of the producers I was working with was producing a story in Philly about the homeless mentally ill. And at the last minute, I can't remember what happened to her, but she said, I can't do it. You go do it. And so I had never done interviews before. I had never gone out and shot with a crew on my own before. And so off I went to Philly, riding around, you know, in the whatever, you know, Philly subway with the homeless mentally ill, and did probably the longest interview ever because I asked every question I could think of. That's when I learned really to like do your homework and pare your interview questions down. Anyway, it was bumpy, but it was great. And that kind of, I think after that, they had the confidence to then send me out doing it for others. The second one was I was freelance for 13 years in DC, and got a call from a woman that I had worked with at the production company who said, "Do you want to, an EP position? We're launching a network called Fit TV," and this was way back. Discovery Channel owned a fitness station. I was like, well, exactly how much money do I have, save for my children to go to college? None. So I thought, well, let me try this. I'll just try this. And that was what, 17 years ago, and I haven't looked back. And I realized I knew nothing about the business of television, about a network. When you're in production, you're kind of in your little world, it's like I knew the inside, everything inside and out about making a show and shooting and producing and writing. I had no idea what the broader scope was once it got to a network. So it was quite the learning experience at the time, but I'm glad I stuck with it. And you know what? Honestly, the way I run things through my mind now is, sure, try it. And what happens if you don't like it? If you don't like it, you leave it a year, right? You try something else. So I wouldn't let fear or uncertainty, if there's an opportunity for you, be a reason to not try something. Just jump in with both feet, and then you could always do something else later.
The other benefit of trying things and working with others is that you develop a knowledgeable appreciation about how the whole system works, and learn enough to be competent about what reporting is like, what videography is like, what audio is like, etc. And even if you never pursue any of those directly, you will be a better colleague to your colleagues because you have an appreciation of what they're expert at, even if you're doing something else. Because it's not a happy situation when you're walking into a production and you really don't understand what those other people are doing.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Someone used the analogy one time, and I assume it's still true, that folks who work for UPS, even when you're high-level executive at UPS, you start by delivering packages. Mm-hmm. And to me, your business in television, you better start delivering packages. And when I made coffee for the other people in the production, it was great coffee. And when I needed to photocopy or I needed to tape log, damn it, if they weren't the best tape logs out there. That's how you not just develop skills, but kind of a work ethic that's important. Mm-hmm. And when you work your way up and you have a basis, not only do, as Kathleen says, you understand what other people do, you have an appreciation for what other people do. And when you're the exec up here, you really appreciate what that PA is doing for you and how tough that job is to be a PA. So I don't know, I happen to think there aren't any shortcuts. And I know people who sort of get lucky and land in higher positions in television, whatever your business is, without really having that basis. I think you need the basis. I think there's no better way than starting from the bottom and working your way up.
And knowing how to pull and coil cable has turned out to be useful in the rest of my life.
Heck yeah. I mean, I'll still pick up gear, right? And crew are like, oh, good, don't touch that. I'm like, it's like, pick it up and be helpful. You're never beyond doing anything helpful. It's just like the cameraman is working, busting his hump trying to get this, whatever you're doing shot. It's just like you jump in it. And you know what? It's a really collaborative business. And I think we all need to remember that no matter your level, it's a collaborative business. We rely on so many who are expert at, whatever their little niche is. Every one of them is critical for any kind of production to happen. There are very few who just can, do soup to nuts all by themselves. You all need to rely on somebody else. So yes, respect everybody along the way too.
And there's two mantras that come to mind as both Kathleen and Lisa are talking. One is something that a mentor, it was a Penn State grad, told me many years ago, is that how can you get promoted if you're not doing the job you're assigned well at the time, which seems obvious, but has always been apparent. And the second is, when you're looking for, or at least when I'm evaluating people, whether it's to work with or the few times I've been in a hiring position, it's two things that seem so simple, but are actually hard to find packaged together, that they can do the job well and that they're easy to work with. I know people that are very nice, but when we needed that quick soundbite to play in the sportscast, they couldn't do it. And then there were people that were savants at getting things, sound bites or whatever, but really struggled to work well with others. So usually the people that can combine both those traits tend to go pretty far. I want to pivot to the multimedia element that's in both your jobs. And we'll get more into each of your roles in that in a moment. But I think students would find, and by the way, the question and answer portion, that chat is open. So feel free to chime in at any time and we will interweave that. But I think students and everyone that's on would be interested in what your day-to-day looks like in your position.
Well, the day-to-day for a media executive, as I was for 19 years in Harrisburg and a few years before that, eventful years in North Dakota, was a lot of interaction with senior staff, with board members, and with events that bring the community together. So visibility for a media executive is very important. And the visibility took a variety of forms. I was and remain on Twitter carefully as KPAV, Kathleen Pavelko. Not so much on Facebook, but Twitter happened to be a useful way to communicate. And then we had a variety of newsletters and so on. I also did a monthly videotaped statement call conversation, not so much conversation, but statement, which was an update to donors and to others. So I'm was outbound to community, to donors, to staff, to board, using all of the platforms that were and are available.
Day to day, I'm going to back up a second and just, I think what I've learned from having a chance to speak with students is that a lot of people don't know what an executive producer does. And I think sometimes an executive producer in film is not the same as what an executive producer in television is. But basically what I like to say is if a series succeeds, it's my fault. And if a series fails, it's my fault. So basically, an executive producer is responsible for everything you're seeing. Everything you see in a series, from the casting to the graphics to the writing, the music, the pace, the edit style, all of it. Now, obviously, again, back to the the collaborative effort. I'm working with a production company and a set of producers who are creating that content, but what they're creating is what I oversee. So, and I have to see this through the lens of the network, whatever network you're working with. It's like, well, we're aiming for, men and women aged 25 to 54, whatever. You find your demo, here's the vibe we're going for, or we're going for family programming. And my guidance is, my job is to guide that production with the network in mind. So you don't get just sort of, although in streamers, it's kind of different now, you get a little bit of everything. Networks typically, like Discovery, Animal Planet, TLC, there's a certain vibe, there's a certain audience they're going for. And so my job is to make sure that A, it's the best show it can be, that it's entertaining, that it's going to survive another season and a second season and fifth, sixth, and eighth season, and that it upholds the values of the network, whatever the network message is and what the advertisers have been sold. So getting back to day, I screen a lot. And these are, shows that are sent to me time coded, and sometimes it's a slog, sometimes it's a joy, but every show that comes to me, I watch a rough cut, sometimes 2 rough cuts, fine cut, lock, sometimes multiple locks, so we still haven't nailed it before it goes out the door and is online and ready for air. Yeah, I think if I could say, the more successful executive producers are the ones who don't push responsibility and blame onto others, like, oh, the cameraman screwed it up. I take responsibility for it. Even if I wasn't there, I take responsibility for it. And I also roll my sleeves up with my team to try to fix it. Like, we're in a bump, and I have one right now. It's not great. It's going to take a while to get it into shape. We're working together to get it into shape. And I think all of you know that sometimes, you know what, the grade's not the best, but you killed yourself for it. What I have to remember is the work and the time and the effort and the blood and sweat and tears that went into some of these productions, even when they're crap, to be blunt. Sometimes you get it, it's like, oh, this is a mess. Somebody spent a lot of time on it. So it's my job to shore up that team. Let's rally and figure out how to fix it. Here's a suggestion, there's a suggestion, let's try this, and let's see if we can make a show that is not only going to rate well, but rate well for multiple seasons.
You ever get involved, Lisa, in show selection, or has the show been selected and now it is your job, as you said, to steer it towards success?
That's a good question. So most big networks have a development team. And so those are the folks who beat the bushes and go to lunch, well, used to go to lunches with all the production companies and producers who pay, hey, I have a great idea to pitch. I don't have to do that. If I get someone who wants to pitch to me, it's like, I'm going to send them to somebody else. But then what happens is I collaborate with the development person. He said, well, this is sort of the fuzzy vision that I had, and it's my job. And sometimes it's like, okay, here's, you know, one grape in an entire bucket of fruit, you know, how do you turn this little grape into the bucket of fruit? And so that's where, you know, sometimes you get just a nugget of idea that you have to blow out into a series. Lots of times it's easy to make something look good when you have 3 minutes to pitch and this guy's a great character. But how do you make that great character someone who's got legs for not just 1 hour, but multiple hours over multiple seasons? And that's the tough part. Did I answer your question? I kind of get off on tangents.
Loved it. Kathleen, I was going to say, we were talking that in public media that you guys were doing a lot of stuff with schools during the pandemic. I'm certain, or I would imagine that you're always thinking of, does this represent our network's values?
And I think people recognize that the brand of public media, I'll talk about public television in particular, is sort of bifurcated. You've got the longtime commitment to children, but you also have a longtime commitment to long-form documentaries, nature, frontline, American experience, et cetera. What the stations have been doing, and I'm particularly proud of what WITF has been doing, but public stations nationwide, recognize that with so much at-home learning that most school districts were short on available standards-based content that they could integrate into the remote learning. And remote learning, curiously enough, is in the DNA of public television. The majority of public television stations that went on the air, most of them went on the air from 65 to 1970, let's say. And that was an era in which, I kid you not, they would live broadcast standards-based 15-minute programs for third grade English, followed by fifth grade science. And they would roll a TV into a classroom and the kids would watch it on broadcast TV, live real time, because at that time there were film strips, but no realistic way to tape material. These days, of course, you know, the technology enables this to happen in a much more flexible way. But the need went through the roof when COVID closed so many schools. And so what stations like WITF and our colleagues around the country have done is make available standards-based for Pennsylvania students content that the teachers can then use K through 12, as a matter of fact. And they're also exploring new technical ways of delivering, not just internet and not just broadcast, but something called datacast, which encodes into the broadcast signal the programs that we want people to be able to receive in their homes. And there's about a $100 receiver that serves as the instead of Wi-Fi, you have a $100 receiver, which decodes a broadcast signal. So you don't have to have internet connectivity at all for data casting to allow you to access this programming. So there are big tests underway, and heaven knows this crisis is an opportunity to demonstrate, once again, public television's educational values.
I want to delve into the streaming, the explosion of streaming, and both of you are involved in it in different ways. Lisa, why don't we start with Discovery Plus and the immediate impact of its arrival?
Yeah, I'd say we feel like we're living in the Wild West right now. In some ways, when you look at cable, cord cutters, fewer people are watching cable, fewer eyeballs on network television, except for live sports. On one hand, it's like, oh, woe is me, television cable industry, it's kind of going down.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, the streamers come about. And Discovery was a little late to the game with Discovery Plus, but we launched early January, and man, it's gone through the roof. And I see this as a huge opportunity, not only for those of us who've been in the business and now have to learn how to do things a little bit differently, but for all the folks on this call who are, thinking, geez, what do I do next? What's happening to television? It's exploding because people can watch it where they want to watch it, when they want to watch it. It used to be, well, things have to be a half hour or an hour. They can be a minute on seconds on TikTok. It can be a minute long. It can be, more than an hour long. And then, oh, I'm going to binge the whole season, and you spend an entire day watching Bridgerton or whatever. The sky's the limit. It truly is, So I think that is a huge opportunity for anyone. You're not pigeonholed, we had to do this a half hour, 1 hour, not anymore. The other piece is, think of all the people who have, all the Instagrammers and, folks who've become celebrities, made careers, become filmmakers, completely on their own. You don't need to be, tied to a production company anymore. There are different ways of getting discovered, different ways of getting your product out there, your work of art out there. So look at this as an opportunity. So it's so funny, I think about 3 months ago, we're like, oh man, what's happening in the cable industry? Well, guess what? It's changing, but in a good way. It's getting broader. But some things never change. For me, fascinating people. I mean, I dig ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That never gets old. It's a good story with heart and with emotion and with, ups and downs and surprises never gets old. I don't care if you're talking about, 5 seconds or 5 hours. Some of, great storytelling is going to survive no matter what. So when people get down on, what's happening, to the business, to me, it's broadening, both in scope and in size.
I do think the more pathways you have to deliver irresistible content, the better your organization is. And that's certainly true in the public media world. On the public radio side, very early adopter of podcasts and really opened the door for what has become a commercial bonanza and a way for celebrities that you wouldn't think would be involved, like President Obama, to be involved in podcasting. So yes, the more pathways, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathleen, how have you built it up at I mean, I know you've really built a behemoth of in terms of on the multimedia side. How did you go about developing that?
I think the first step that I took in the end was the most significant, and that is that I reorganized the content side when I arrived at WITF. And so instead of having a TV manager, a radio manager, a marketing person, and so on like that, I created a content strategy team. And that evolved over time. But ultimately, what it did was combine pay less attention to the delivery method and more attention to the development of content, with the expectation that it would be delivered through a variety of mechanisms, including live events, which have become quite important in the COVID world. So breaking down those silos was probably the single most important thing. And I got to tell you, there was a lot of resistance. It's like, I'm a radio manager. What do I have to do with those people over there with those big camera things, So it took some time. But eventually the love of the content, whether it was journalism or whether it was documentary or whether it was local or state history, that ultimately is what brought the people together in recognition that their output was stronger and more creative if we ignored the various platforms intended for delivery.
You know, one thing that's, Lisa alluded to it, that to me is of particular interest is there's all this talk about younger people, short attention span, have to get to them immediately. And TikTok certainly is sort of, that's, exhibit A. At the same time, I think of some of the most successful programs in the pandemic, Michael Jordan, The Last Dance documentary on ESPN, and the idea that people will sit down and binge shows for 8 hours.
Yeah.
That's an interesting dichotomy there. I guess, does it just come back to compelling content that people are curious about?
What do you think, Lisa?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely compelling content. And I also think, we try to create rules like, well, it needs to be, people with a short attention span or long attention span or whatever. As developers, you're always trying to, come up with sort of the game plan with what kind of stuff to produce. And I think audiences are surprising us by the attention span. And that a lot of shows, I think for a certain generation, you get conditioned to the commercial break, right? Things are, 6 hour or 6 blocks within an hour. Anymore, stuff is just running and running for, hour and 20 minutes. And again, folks will binge it. If it's good, they will watch, whether it's 6 seconds or 6 hours. You think of all the examples of the stuff that's working best. These are passionate people. Even Tiger King, crazy man, but he was passionate. Like, he was totally convinced what he was doing was the right thing. And Michael Jordan's another perfect example. They're just fabulous stories. I think behind the scenes is always going to be fascinating to people. Lots of times there are great things going on in your neighborhood, in your town that people aren't aware of, individuals who are doing amazing things. Those are the folks to seek out and tell stories about.
And I think there are two practical observations in addition, and that is there's still a pause button. And the other is that people do have more time that they can devote in chunks of time to watching what intrigues them most.
Right. I think, and obviously COVID contributed to that, but I think the behavior established during COVID of binge watching, I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. I think we thought okay, cable's going to be great during COVID. Not necessarily. What mattered is being able to watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. And through streaming, you can get it a lot, for a lot less money than you can cable. It really is turning the industry on its head right now. So it's, I think we at Discovery, we were stressing out about it, like how, how do we pivot into this new territory? But, you look at Netflix and Hulu and, our thinking was, it has to be originals. It has to be fabulous originals that will draw people to your air. Sometimes that's the case, but I think with Discovery, we're finding that it's the Chip and Joanna Gaines and the Gold Rush guys and the people who are hot on cable. If you offer it now streaming, people are going to go for it in streaming. And our strategy now is to take all our best stuff, put it on, stream it to get people to, sort of move off of cable and onto screening. Not that we were trying to get rid of any cable customers. We'll take cable money. But yeah, I think clearly the future is streaming.
It's an arms race. ESPN Plus, Disney Plus. I mean, you name it. It can actually get pretty expensive when you're doling out. I'm looking at my bills of all the different streaming services I'm now paying for.
You're right. And that's going to be the next thing. It's like, well, by the time I pay for all the streamers, I'm like right up to a cable bill. But again, you can pick and choose. And, with a lot of streamers, you get, hundreds, thousands of hours of programming for your monthly price. So you have access to a lot more. I'm streaming stuff. I mean, I just watched Big Little Lies. I mean, I am so late to that game. That was 2017, 2018. And I'm just finding it now, right? So, even stuff that's streaming now and they're putting out fresh programming, they're promoting some of their older stuff, and you end up watching. Anyway, there's a lot. There's, your $6 a month is going to get you, a lot of programming. And yeah, you're right. You can hit pause. You can finish it when you want.
But those customers are more fluid, the old, all right, I got to call my cable company. Yeah, I'm not going to go through the hassle. I mean, I can unsubscribe just as quickly as I subscribed. The other thing about to go to Kathleen for a moment, local journalism, Lisa alluded to it. And by the way, folks, and we want to talk to you and your career questions. That's the least we can do. That's our streaming service, free of charge. Please, if you have questions, the Q&A is open, and we will certainly try to answer them. Local journalism, Kathleen, it seems like, especially, I think it's something like the vaccine, for instance. People want to know, what are the regulations in my town? What are the, where are we in that process? So it just seems like information that is really specific to people's communities is of even more importance right now.
Well, it's true. It's always been the case that one of the real appeals of journalism for the citizen is its innate practicality. It's whether, what laws just got passed that are going to affect me. What are the changes that I can expect because they're going to tear down that bridge and build another one? Or in these days, who has vaccine and how do I sign up for it? And today, local journalism is operating in a context in which the newspaper infrastructure has been decimated. We've had the decline of newspapers across the country, and the virtual elimination of weeklies, which were also, one of the elements that provided local information. And so what's the business model? The business model for public media has always been donor contributions, that is from the people who consume your content, as well as from foundations and other sources. And it used to be that for-profit media organizations, news organizations would look at this and say, this is the world's worst possible business model. You give it away for free, and then after the fact, you ask people to pay for it. But given the environment in which for-profit journalism operates, they're now looking at our media model and they're saying, that financial model doesn't seem too bad. And they call it subscription rather than membership or whatever, or some of them, there are a handful that have actually become not-for-profits, changed their legal status. So we are, all of us in the journalism business, working out what new business models will sustain journalism going forward, because merely selling eyeballs to advertisers is not, has already failed and will not work in the future.
And I see we have some questions coming in, and so we'll get to Cade's in a moment. Just because you were talking about finance, Kurt's question is a perfect follow-up, which is, what are the financial challenges of following viewer demand from broadcast cable to streaming? Do you get enough revenue to produce the quality content people are looking for in a streaming environment? I don't know how much both of you want to open up your balance sheets of your companies, but we're open to it.
Okay, I can feel Discovery Big Brother like breathing down my neck right now. I mean, a lot of us have that question. How do you monetize it? My first question about anything is, how do you monetize it? A lot of people aren't there. You can buy advertiser driven or non-advertiser. So you're paying more to subscribe if you don't want advertisers, but there are advertisers and streaming services as well. So we and everybody else are able to monetize it that way. I mean, I keep hearing about Netflix budgets. I don't know where their money's coming from, but they're insanely high budgets, producing budgets that they're working with. So, I am certainly not, thank God, I don't work in business affairs. I'm not the one who has to figure that stuff out. But between, subscribers and advertisers, it's kind of the way it worked in cable too. You have your subscribers and advertising. It's kind of working the same way on streaming as well. Will the prices stay as low as they are right now for all of these streamers? We're seeing them start to creep up. I'm curious myself about, how long can you stay at, $5 and $6 a month? how long would that last? That then I suppose the hope is you get, your fans and people are so, accustomed to using it that they're not going to care that it goes up $1 next month, or we're not going to pay attention.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you guys do. I don't know.
Yeah, we're still trying to build the revenue plane as we are flying it.
Mhm.
In the public media world, it's primarily a philanthropic model, but one of the new developments has been to encourage foundations and donors who haven't typically given to public media or to journalism to consider it. And so one of the targets there has been what are usually referred to as community foundations. Many communities and or regions have them, and their focus has traditionally been social services, education, and so on. And among the things they try to do is to shift public policy in ways that enhance education and social services for their communities. But if there is no viable news platform in their communities any longer, there's not much of a way for them to communicate to legislators or to shape public opinion. So many public stations have encouraged community foundations to consider journalism as among the items they should fund on a regular basis.
And it's interesting when I think of the pricing of all this. To go to Lisa's point, with Netflix, at least in our family, it seems like we're all, my sister and I are been out of the house for a while, but we each are sort of in charge of a streaming service. And Netflix, for instance, you can get more than one person, mom, dad, the whole family on. And so if I'm paying for Netflix for the family and they sort of gradually go from $11.99 to $13.99, which they did, it's not a big deal to me. They're not going from 11 to 24. And I think that sort of gradual increase in price, they've got me in. Once they get me in the door, maybe it's sort of hard to leave. It's like, well, everyone else enjoys it. It's just a very smart business model. To Kate's question, what is some advice you'd give to a freshman? I have a lot of time before I go into the workforce. Yes, you do. So what clubs or orgs do you think I should join now, as well as any skills?
I'd be interested in what Cade's major is. Cade, maybe you can let us know that. For broadcast, I mean, it's been a couple of years since my daughter was there, but there is a news broadcast club that was phenomenal. That you don't have to. I don't think you audition, but anyone can join it starting as a freshman. I think WPSU you have to be a junior or senior. I could be talking out of turn. Mike Porman will straighten me out if I am. But I would say get involved in the news club that exists on campus, and I'm not sure what others.
And Kate's a broadcast journalism major.
Definitely get involved in the news club. Mike, if you're there, do you know what it is, what it's called? It's a news club. I remember my daughter did it earlier. But it allows you as a freshman to get involved in broadcasting.
Well, I'd say Com Radio for sure at BSN TV. Pam is chiming in.
Pam.
Thank you, Pam. And Com Radio. I mean, you've got which is great on the radio side. So and I would say check in with the college if you have, I mean, they can guide you in a lot of different resources.
I would also encourage early involvement in the relevant national organizations. The one that comes most immediately to mind is ONA, the Online News Association. They've got scholarships for participation in their annual conferences. They have regional entities as well. And one of the benefits of ONA is, well, it's an online news organization. So there are persons interested in broadcasting, there are persons interested in social media, persons interested in podcasting and a variety of platforms. They're very welcoming to young people. And it gives you a network of colleagues who are nationwide, which puts you in a very good position when the time does come for internships and ultimately for jobs.
I don't know, I hope I'm pronouncing your first name correctly, Jana. Her question, I think it's a great question. What was one of the biggest challenges both of you faced in the journalism field?
Yikes. Um, well, I'm going to put on my manager hat now. So I'm speaking as a chief content officer, speaking as a CEO. When you're the head of a journalism organization, a news organization, it is inevitable that some of your quality reporting will raise hackles. More recently than some years ago, but it's always been true. And so I've always felt that it was very important to prepare the board of the organization to act as a heat shield for the practice of responsible journalism. They are there to, when the job is done right, that they are there to say, that's our job and we are protecting our journalism and our journalists and our reporters. And there've been a half a dozen such disputes and concerns, often from legislators, not always, but often from legislators. But the time spent making sure that your board understands what the responsibility is, and the time spent listening to those who are critical of your reporting, that is the best time spent ever, because it ultimately it increases the trust level of the community in the quality and the trustworthiness of your work.
How about for you, Lisa?
Yeah, I would say budgets and lack thereof. Like, no matter how big your budget is, the dream for a project is usually bigger than the budget you have. The flip side of that is I think it also breeds creativity. You know, we're all tasked with figuring out how to do the best work you can with, you know, the least amount of resources.
And I'm just looking, Kurt has some suggestions, com radio, talking with a journalism faculty member.
Yes, me not knowing what the names of those.
And Kurt says we take 4 or 5 students to ONA each year and have students working in the ONA newsroom. And you can talk to faculty to get involved. Thank you, Kurt Chandler. And Pam asks about storytelling. Can you talk about how knowing your audience and where they consume content matters? Sometimes a story that might be a great documentary might actually work better as a digital series because the audience is actually a social audience.
Well, my best story in that regard is where the audience is the filmmaker. For about 15 years, WITF produced a series called Our Town. And what we did was we solicited for about 20 persons who had either video cameras or more recently, iPhone capability to go out and capture, both with video and audio, some interviews, what they saw as the essence of their town. And that could be Selinsgrove, it could be Lancaster, it could be, name your town. And it was a gigantic editing job, basically, because you brought them in, the 20 or so persons who were capturing their community, interviewed them, and then along with their footage, assembled a story that reflected our town that the people who lived there saw. It was terrific.
That goes back to that local leaning into that.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, anything you're thinking of?
Yeah, we tend to think of them as, the digital versus linear, and linear is, the broadcast stuff, as companions. And the goal is to lift raise eyeballs across all platforms. So if we've got, I'll use Chicken and Renegades again as an example, strong, they've got now a network and strong shows that are linear. Well, we love Joanna Gaines so much. Let's do a spin-off series for digital, and she's doing cooking. So ultimately, I guess we consider audience less than we consider the absolute, largest number of eyeballs that we can get, from regardless of platform. And then we also have our social teams who are doing lifts from those shows, 5-minute lifts. And the goal is to elevate the recognition of all of it. whether it is your linear series pushing to digital series, whether it's digital series pushing back to linear, anything that we can do to broaden our footprint is how we're approaching things. It used to be just, we only thought about what goes on linear, and the digital stuff was kind of, the stuff on the side. But now we're seeing generally your younger audiences are going to be the folks you're going to reach on digital. Sometimes our racier stuff, the after dark kind of stuff goes on, digital. You don't have the same kind of rules, but it's also a different kind of audience.
Mhm.
It's a tricky juggling act. So you don't want to cannibalize one
That's right.
against the other. Colette, by the way, mentioned, great suggestion, Colette, Penn State Athletics, if you're interested on the sports side, as ways to get involved and talk about multimedia. They were at the forefront when I was in school to having student reporters. And then on top of that, again, I'm more looped in on the sports side, is Big Ten Network. That might be more of an upperclassman thing as you develop. Get some reps, but the partnership they have with Penn State Athletics is terrific. And Colette mentions Com Agency. We have a couple of moments left before I make sure that we promote our upcoming series. Just to get some final thoughts from both of you, and both of you have, just done a wonderful job providing insight. So the floor is yours.
I'd only say how grateful I am to have had the Penn State education that I had, both as an undergraduate and a master's degree in journalism. It gave me the solid foundation upon which the multifaceted career was built. And it also gave me a network which has been persistent now over many decades. So thank you, Penn State.
I second that. Yeah, I think there's no matter where you go, there's if I see a Penn Stater walking by in DC, I'll shout down the block, "Hey, we are!" But the idea that as a student graduating, you're not alone. There are plenty of people who've gone before you, plenty of people who are here to offer advice, support, suggestions. This is a small thing, something I read every single day. It's called Synopsis. I have nothing to do with it. I don't know who runs it. I have no investment in it. Synopsis.com, though, is great if you want to know what's going on in the industry. You'll learn about production companies. You'll learn about ratings. You'll learn about stuff that's been lit up, new productions, CYNOPSIS. And there are also jobs on there, too. So that's probably worth checking out.
And it's free. Totally free, and they have
absolutely free. Yes,
absolutely free. They have Synopsis, the general one. They have Synopsis Sports, and that's sort of a great piece of advice. Half the battle, or half the game, is just knowing what's going on. When you're looking for an opportunity, you look at Synopsis and you see, oh, this person's leaving. Well, that's probably creating an opening.
That's right.
Some great food for thought. Well, Kathleen and Lisa, thank you so much. Let me, as we close our series, remind folks out there, and thank you all so much for attending. Let me make sure I didn't miss any questions. I didn't. That coming up on Tuesday, March 2nd, is a panel focused on social media and digital journalism that will be moderated by Ron Wagner. Panelists include Ryan Beckler, who is the deputy head of social media at NBC News, and Catherine Dreiser, the senior social producer at the Drew Barrymore Show, part of CBS Interactive. Derek Major, digital editor for Black Enterprise Magazine. And Jen Simons, and I apologize, I hope I'm not mispronouncing people's names, but she is the executive vice president and head of production development and programming for Barstool Sports. And then on Tuesday, March 9th, Dan Solomon hosts Digital Media and Marketing, moderated by Jeannie Oliver, formerly of the New York Times. That panel has Julie Gorby from Google. She's the senior business lead. Stephanie Laser, vice president, advertising, technology, and operations at News Corp. And Marla Persaud, the director of communications at the Milken Institute Center for Strategic Philanthropy. We mentioned Pam Hervey, who has moderated. These are sessions that you can get the link for that are archived, as this one will be as well. She had a terrific panel, news, features, and documentaries with Rob King of ESPN and Mark Lima of CBS News, and already another session focused on corporate communications with Patrick Bunting of NBC Universal Media, Bernadette Dunn of CommScope, and Carol Rathgosser of Accelerated Enrollment Services. Wow. Hope let me get some water. Kathleen and Lisa, just thank you once again. So appreciative of your time and service to the college.
Our
You're most
pleasure.
welcome.
And good luck to all the students.
Take care,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Good night.